In this series of videos I'm attempting to repair and restore this Sharp MZ80A personal computer. In the previous videos in this series I stripped the unit down, repaired any parts that needed repairing, cleaned it all up, brightened the case, reassembled it, and it appeared to be working. And in this video I had intended to run some software and show it working, but as you can probably tell from its appearance I've encountered a small problem. And that problem is the J key doesn't work, and all the other keys work. I've tested every single key and it's only the J key, and because this uses a multiplexed keyboard, it kind of rules out the likelihood of there being an electronic fault, because otherwise you'd get more than one key not working. And because it's just a single key, it seemed fairly likely it was the key itself. So I broke out the multimeter and started buzzing out the keys, and sure enough the J key isn't working. So if we take one of the other keys and we have the meter set to continuity mode, if I just connect this and press the key, you can see that works fine. But if we take the J key and try the same test, it's not doing anything. It also feels different. I can't feel it actually doing anything. It's got the spring, but I can't feel any contacts inside, so it might just be full of dirt, or the contact may have broken. Now unfortunately, to get these keys out is a bit of a pain. They're clipped in. You can see the keyboard plate has these square cutouts, and these have these kind of retention clips on each side of the switch, so they clip into place. So when you desolder the pins, you can't just push the switch out because there's a square step on the on this catch, and however hard you push these pins, it's not going to push it out. So the way I get these out is you desolder the two pins, and then using a thin screwdriver or something you can work your way in from the edge to press the two clips and pop the switch out. Now, unfortunately, because all the rows of switches are offset from each other, if you want to get down to one of the lower ones, you have to take some of the upper ones out first. And so you can see here I've kind of worked my way down to the J key. You could come down from the bottom and take out fewer keys if you don't mind removing the space bar, but I wanted to go this way. It just makes it easier for me, and it saved me taking the keyboard out as well. Gives me something to support the keyboard with. It doesn't keep sliding around the bench while I'm trying to work on it. So the next thing is what to do about this. So you're not really going to be able to see this very clearly, but in the switch assembly you've got these two main plastic parts, not including the keycap. You've got the black plastic piece on top and the grey plastic piece, and if you look at the black piece, this outer edge has got a taper on it, and then it's held in place with these two tabs, two on each side. So when this is assembled, the black piece is just pushed into the grey piece, and the taper that's on this edge, see it's covered in dust as well, the taper that's on this edge splays these two apart, and then it pops into place. So to get it apart, what you have to do is very carefully ease this tab away on both sides and allow the black piece to pop out of the grey piece. If you go too far, of course, it'll just snap off, and you probably end up destroying the key. So judging by the amount of dust that's coming out of this, I think it's just full of dust. I think it's just completely full of dirt, and it's stopping the contacts moving. But the only way to clean it out really is to get it apart. So what I'm going to do is try and get the black plastic piece off. I'll remove the keycap first, and what I will then do is heat up the key. I'll get it fairly warm. I'm not going to get it too hot because of course it will melt. I'm going to get it fairly warm to make it a bit more pliable, and then try and work the black piece off the key and see if we can get to the internal workings. Now, some people have asked me to show more of this being done, drilling holes, this sort of thing, which I don't really do for several reasons. One is because me trying to do this through a 1-inch viewfinder on a camera is almost impossible. You can see far more of this process than I can. so that would almost certainly result in failure, but also it'd be fairly boring. The hole that I drilled for the pivot on the cassette door, for example, took about 30 minutes to drill, and if I videoed that, all you'd be able to see is my hand, and it would be 30 minutes of very dull videos. So what I'm doing is saying what needs to be done and what I'm doing, rather than necessarily exactly how to do it, because that will also depend on what tools you have. So next thing, I'll try and get this key apart and see if we can manage to resurrect it. As you can see, I've taken the switch apart, and sure enough there's dirt in here, and I think that's what's causing the problem. So it's going to be difficult to see. You can't really see it that clearly on camera, but what you have here are two metal plates, and they have a very small separation between them, and when you depress the key plunger, it moves this spring plate. So basically you push the plunger in, it moves this spring plate, and it pushes on this center tab on the switch itself. This is the actual switch part, and there was a lot of dirt in here, so this wasn't being pressed in properly. And what I'm going to do is take this over to the workshop. I'm going to put it in the ultrasonic bath for probably 10-15 minutes, let it clean out properly, and then I'll blow it, use a compressor, blow it dry, and we'll come back, test it, and see if it then works reliably as a switch. If it does, we can reassemble, and hopefully that will be a decent repair. I did manage to get this off without breaking any of the tabs off. Like I said, I heated it up, didn't get it too hot, just warm enough to make it nice and pliable. If you go too far, then of course it will either melt or it will stay in whatever position you bend it to, so it won't then reassemble properly. But it popped apart reasonably easily, and hopefully we can get it resurrected. Okay, so I've tried cleaning out the switch. I've got it connected to the multimeter, and what we need is for the switch to make contact with very light pressure on this tab. So if I try pressing it, I'm pressing it very lightly, and it now seems to be working. So I'll get the switch reassembled, and hopefully it will then work correctly and we can reassemble the unit. So I've got the internal parts fitted back into the switch housing, but because the cover's so difficult to get off, I want to test this before I reassemble it. So what I've got is the plunger, the spring, and the actual switch plate itself fitted. And what we should be able to do is test this and see if the switch actually makes contact when we press in the plunger. And I can then put the outer cover on, being fairly confident it's going to work. So we should make contact when we push this plunger in, which it does. So we can be fairly confident that putting the outer cover on, the switch in theory should work. So I'll get the cover snapped into place and we'll see if it still operates. I've put the outer cover on. I was careful to make sure the spring engaged with the little boss that it's supposed to sit in, and hopefully now the key will function. These keys are quite hard to find, which is why I'm going to all this trouble rather than just replacing it. And that now seems to operate fine. So I'll get the keys soldered back into the keyboard, and then we'll see if the key actually produces any characters on the screen when it's pressed. I've refitted the keys to the keyboard, soldered them in place, and we can now power this up and see if the keys now all function. Let's wait for the tube to warm up. And we'll try pressing the key, and it is now working. I'll test the other keys I took out to make sure they're now also still working, and they're working fine. I'll test all the other keys again, and it should be a reliable repair. There's no reason to think the key will be unreliable. It was just dirt in there, and I also eased out the actuator tab very slightly just to increase the spring pressure very slightly. You won't be able to feel it on the key, but it does now feel much more positive and exactly the same as all the others, so hopefully that's a good repair. And if you do get an issue like this, it's always worth trying this sort of thing. As long as you're careful and don't destroy the key, it can be far more straightforward than trying to source a replacement part. This total repair took about 20 minutes, so it's well worth the effort, I think, to keep the machine going. So that's it for this video. It's an extra video, but in the next one we will look at running some software.